Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
We've all heard the impact that high cholesterol can have on our overall health and how it can put us at a greater risk for heart disease, which is the leading cause of death within the United States. We have to understand what is high cholesterol, when do we look at high cholesterol as being problematic, and how do we understand the difference between having elevated VLDL, LDL, HDL, and what those actually mean in terms of their interpretation. When we look at the American society as a whole, we know that well over 30% of the U.S. population has high cholesterol. We also recognize that high cholesterol has been directly linked to being a major indication for cardiovascular events later on in life. There was a study that just came out this week out of the University of Maryland School of Medicine talking about having high cholesterol early in life can lead to heart problems by middle age. So I want to talk about all of these different factors and kind of clear up some common misconceptions when it comes to cholesterol on today's episode. I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and when it comes to cholesterol, we know that this is a major issue. And I'll reflect back to the study out of University of Maryland talking about how having elevated cholesterol during your teen years or in your early 20s increases your risk of having a heart attack, stroke, or another cardiovascular event during the middle ages. So this is something that we know is incredibly problematic. We have to understand how that actually occurs. What is it exactly that's occurring within the body that is driving up all of these issues, and understanding what is LDL? What does LDL actually mean? That's your low density lipoprotein, the so-called bad cholesterol. And recognizing that when someone has elevated bad cholesterol, which is generally looking at levels above 100 milligram per deciliter, we look at LDL levels. When that level is too high, this can really be an indication of extensive damage that is occurring that you cannot even see, that you don't recognize. So that's why lowering your cholesterol can really reduce your risk of having a heart attack. But we also have to realize that we want to have good cholesterol. We need to have cholesterol. It's part of our brain chemistry. In the absence of having adequate HDL or good cholesterol, this can certainly lead to cognitive decline as well as increase our risk for a cardiovascular event. So while we have bad cholesterol, we also have good cholesterol. We want to take care of our good cholesterol and maintain that because that is actually cardioprotective. So this is why when we think about diet, we have to think about what we can do that will help to enhance our body's ability to fend off all of the complications that come along with a standard American diet, which is many, certainly. We do recognize this. We realize that the standard American diet leads us down a path to the development of cholesterol issues as well as an increase of heart disease. Reason why, lack of fiber. That's the primary. The standard American diet usually yields 5 to 10 grams of fiber per day when you should be getting 30 grams. And we know that the fiber plays a significant role when it comes to maintaining proper cholesterol transport as well as maintaining our blood glucose. And if we have elevated blood sugar, this can lead to an issue with triglycerides. That's going to be your circulating fat particles throughout the bloodstream. So this is why diet really makes a huge difference. And they did a study looking at the effect of Mediterranean style diet on endothelial dysfunction. Now, what is endothelial dysfunction? This is when the actual lining of the blood vessels is being damaged because of inflammation. So looking at markers for vascular inflammation. So those different markers would include things such as homocysteine and fibrinogen, looking at high sensitivity C-reactive protein, looking at different interleukin levels to assess the overall amount of inflammation that is occurring. So this was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, where they were talking about how metabolic syndrome has been identified as this major target for dietary therapies. So when they say that, what are they referring to? They're talking about foods. Let food be thy medicine. Unfortunately, they still don't practice that. So while we know foods can make a huge difference in terms of our lipid profile, in terms of our overall cardiovascular risk, oftentimes they usually turn once again to pharmacotherapy. So looking at statin drugs and looking at other medications to try to regulate someone's cholesterol. Now, I'm not here to be for or against statin medications. Certainly, there are times when they may be warranted in certain situations, and certain types of statins may be better for others than other statins. I'm not going to get into the whole realm of good statins, bad statins, if people should be on statins. I have my own opinions of that, but I always say a lot of our problem when it comes to endothelial dysfunction and elevated cardiovascular risk comes down to our diet. Now, we know that in the United States, cholesterol-lowering medications are just a whopping amount of the amount of prescriptions that are written out every single year. Probably 25 million prescriptions for cholesterol-lowering drugs. So that tells you something. But that also makes sense because we know that a good 30% of the U.S. population has elevated cholesterol. So let's go back and let's look a little bit at this study out of the Journal of the American Medical Association. And what they did is they did this single-blind trial that they had people who had elevated cholesterol and they had elevations in different markers for inflammation. So they kind of fell into that category of metabolic syndrome. And they had them follow a Mediterranean-style diet. And then they gave them detailed advice as to how to increase their daily consumption of fruits and vegetables, how to incorporate olive oil into their routine. Having them do this, reducing their bad carbohydrates, reducing the bad fat intake, and then looking at all of these different markers for endothelial function, looking at their arginine levels, looking at their lipid profile, meaning their cholesterol, looking at markers for glucose and insulin. All of these things they were able to assess looking at high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And they found that after 2 years, patients who followed the Mediterranean style diet, consuming foods that were rich in all of these fibers and antioxidants and healthy fats, did significantly better in terms of their overall levels when it came to blood sugar, when it came to their total cholesterol, when it came to markers for inflammation. So this is why, once again, foods do matter, and you always have to start with the food. So this study was conducted to assess the overall effect of a Mediterranean-style diet on how vascular inflammation works. And when people incorporate good, healthy foods, the fruits and the vegetables, those high-fiber foods, those high antioxidant foods, the impact that that makes overall is just so absolutely incredible. Now, we also know that those omega-3 fatty acids coming from things like fish oil play an incredible role in cardiovascular health. And the American Physiological Society was publishing a finding from the American Heart Association talking about how omega-3 fatty acids that are found in fish oil protect against cardiovascular disease. So this particular study was conducted at Michigan Tech University, and it shed light on this phenomenon of providing evidence that fish oil specifically counteracts the detrimental effect of mental stress on the heart. So this is an interesting point of contention too, because we know one thing, that stress coming from the adrenal glands can throw off the glucose insulin pathway, which can then in turn throw off the cholesterol levels. So everything is all interconnected. So in recognizing this, it is really quite interesting to see how you can connect those dots and how much of an impact foods really can make a difference. So what can you be doing supplementation-wise? Well, obviously, we know that if we incorporate in high antioxidant nutrients, vitamin C, definitely very beneficial. Vitamin E in particular, the tocotrienols really can be helpful. The tocotrienols are very targeted towards oxidized LDL. So that's the oxidized or very harmful form of the bad cholesterol. You can have your blood level tested to see the amount of oxidized LDL that's actually occurring. And this will give you an indication like, wow, I probably should be taking some tocotrienols. But we can also look at sterols, and plant sterols have been around for a really long time and really can promote a significant amount of support when it comes to the way that the body manages cholesterol transport. And this is why having a diet that is high in plant sterols really yields a significant amount of advantageous, one would say, benefit to the way that your body is reacting to those elevations or those fluctuations. The Mayo Clinic looked at plant sterols in the management of blood cholesterol levels, and they were doing this meta-analysis looking at over 40 different clinical trials showing that an intake of 2 grams of plant sterols can greatly reduce your LDL levels. So that's the bad cholesterol. And we know that eating foods that are low in saturated fat and cholesterol and high in plant sterols can really make an impact. But taking plant sterols in terms of a supplement can really also yield you that benefit. So the Journal of Atherosclerosis, they looked at this, and they were looking at the evidence relevant to the benefit to the risk relationship utilizing functional foods. So using plant sterols in terms of controlling or regulating healthy cholesterol transport and regulating LDL levels, so the low density lipoprotein. Once again, they found that 2 grams of plant sterols daily caused significant inhibition of cholesterol absorption and hence lowered LDL levels by upwards of 10%. So all of these things that we know that if we have high fiber foods that are packed with wonderful antioxidants, this can really make a difference. Having fatty fish in our diet, salmon for example, but also supplementing with things like krill oil or fish oil, understanding the relationship that fish oil can play when it comes to the way that the body responds to stress and the negative impact stress can have on cardiovascular function. All of these things at the end of the day really will make a significant difference. And knowing that so many people deal with cholesterol and so many people just end up going into their doctor's office and their doctor says, oh, well, your total cholesterol is at 210, so you need a statin. You have to really understand, what do those numbers mean? You have to understand, how are those numbers impacting your overall health? And if we just look at just the total cholesterol alone, oftentimes that is not enough information for us. That's just scraping the surface. We need to know more details. How bad is that cholesterol? Look at that oxidized LDL. That really gives you the most information when we think about the risk of that bad cholesterol. Is the majority of your bad cholesterol in an oxidized state doing harmful damage to the lining of your vessels, driving up vascular inflammation? We have to look at the type of particles that you have. Are your cholesterol particles floating around the body, big and fluffy, or are they small and dense? If they're small and dense, they can actually create more damage because they get stuck within those vessels, and it creates this friction on the vessel wall. And when that happens, then the immune system has to come in and try to clean that up. And this is what we kind of refer to as a plaque. So that can create a stenosis or a narrowing of the vessel, meaning we're getting less blood flow to certain areas throughout the body, which once again can be problematic. We have to know how much inflammation is occurring within those vessels. So looking at levels for fibrinogen and homocysteine really can give you a lot of information. And this is all basic science. This isn't thinking outside of the realm. looking at your high sensitivity C-reactive protein level, understanding why inflammation is so incredibly problematic when it comes to your cholesterol. And it's not always about just the total cholesterol number or the LDL number alone. We have to know, how dangerous is that LDL? Is it small LDL? Is it oxidized LDL? Without knowing that, then we don't take the appropriate steps. So first and foremost, we have to stay physically active, even if you're doing just basic physical activity every week. Walking, for example, going up and down stairs. These are things that are very critical to cardiovascular health. Maintaining healthy blood pressure is also very important. If we are experiencing vascular inflammation that is brought on because of excess cholesterol, and then we add hypertension on top of that, we are once again heightening that risk of a cardiovascular event. So we look at all of these different factors and we say healthy diet, healthy exercise routine, and incorporating in omega-3 fatty acids, incorporating in sterols, very, very beneficial. We see the science. We recognize that 2 grams of those plant sterols in terms of a supplement on a regular daily basis does so much in terms of regulating the way that the body is transporting that bad cholesterol. So there's a lot of things that people can be doing on their own to optimize their overall cardiovascular health. But it starts with the choices that you make. So always keep that in mind. I will do another episode talking about some more nutrients that you can certainly incorporate in. There are so many things that are beneficial when it comes to maintaining healthy cholesterol, when it comes to cardiovascular health. Obviously, tocotrienols, looking at the omega-3 fatty acid, plant sterols, all of your antioxidants, all can be very, very beneficial. So I'll do another episode where I go into some more detail on that, but you can go to our website and check out the Sterols capsules at invitehealth.com, and this is a really wonderful product to have as part of your cholesterol targeting arsenal. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health, and we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.